Welcome to the Westminster News Podcast, your alternative to the mainstream media.
Oh yes, it's that time again. The Westminster News Podcast. Michael Heaver here, of course, joined by Mr. Martin Dormley. How are you doing, mate?
Well, I'm feeling surprisingly fresh for a Saturday morning because I went out last night to a pub and I've got to say it was calamity. In as far as some pubs, I think, have got it really right. You sit at your table, there's table service, there's contactless payment, there's face masks from the staff, no problem. Yesterday, Michael, you had to order your drinks online from a table via an app. It took an hour to get a pint. Michael, really? I've never drank so slowly in my entire life. I had 2 pints in 3 hours. I said, shall we just get some cans and go to the park? I think there's a real mixed bag of people that have got this right and wrong. Places are packed out there. There's a real willingness to get the economy driving again, to socialise again. But some of these places, Michael, they cannot see the wood for the trees.
Well, look, I'm glad you're feeling fresh for this, mate, as I'm sure the audience is, the listeners are. We've got you on top form. Those of you over at westminster.club who are supporting the show will be getting this episode early. So if you support what we're doing, if you want to support alternative media, we don't have a license fee. Head over to westminster.club on our Patreon to support the show and get exclusives and get shows like this early. I want to start off, Martin, with Captain Sir Tom Moore, who, you know, just a fantastic story from beginning to end. Truly the pride of Britain. This legend being knighted by the Queen and answering questions from the press after the ceremony. He said, "I'm absolutely overawed. This is such a high award, and to get it from Her Majesty as well, what more can anyone wish for? This has been an absolutely magnificent day for me."
Yeah, it was an amazingly moving ceremony, actually, because due to his infirmity, he had to stand up. He was holding on to like his walking frame. The Queen came out, walking herself, looking slightly, droopy shouldered. She's obviously getting on a salad. With fine examples of the dignity of age. That's how I see it. She calmly walked up to him. She carefully tapped him on the shoulders with the ceremonial sword. It was an incredibly moving moment. And I think, getting back to Brexit, I know we all often talk about that, but how the elderly were vilified as kind of dooming our country. And I've long been a very, very vocal defender of elderly people, quite rightly so. They've paid their taxes, and this, in Sir Tom's case, fought wars for our freedoms that today's generation, I think, take completely for granted. We've seen that with all these riots and the crime that's going on. And it was a wonderful moment, I think, of national coming togetherness, Michael. It was a wonderful, warm moment.
Yeah, lovely. And I've seen the interviews that he's given. As you say, sort of a really funny sense of humour. And he said he's an optimist who always believes that things will get better. And in the sort of times that we're in now, where some are seeking to divide people, he's a shining light and someone that people should look to. And I think, everything that he's getting in terms of being knighted and honoured in this way is absolutely appropriate and well deserved. Now, I just want to move on to an issue on this show, Martin, that I think, as with many others, doesn't get the media attention it should. We did a few stories yesterday on westminster.com that have got remarkable little attention elsewhere. What if I was to tell you, Martin, that 93% of reported crimes in England and Wales don't result in any charges? That's where we now are. These are new figures out from the Home Office yesterday that reveal the proportion of crimes in England and Wales that now result in charges has fallen to just 7%. For the year ending March 2015, it was 16%. So it is more than halved in a matter of years. And it's one of those issues, Martin, where a lot of people I've spoken to, purely anecdotally, are getting to the point now where they say, well, look, if it's something, if something gets nicked or whatever, I don't even bother calling the police now.
Yeah.
And it's getting to the point. And, you can't now just dismiss that as, people being downbeat or whatever. Well, this is backed up now by the numbers. The numbers show that only 7% in the last year end figures of crime now result in charges. Quite unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a shocker, really. And I do think that there's a key thing here of having faith in the police to be able to do their job. And you're quite right. Even during house break-ins, or if your vehicle is vandalized, or if you see an assault going on the streets, people's first instinct now, Mike, is to film it. They get their phones out and they film it. But reported crime, interestingly, is going up. Unsurprisingly, there are more people, there are more ways of spotting crime. There's a really interesting stat in this, Mike. I looked at the Home Office report on this in some great detail. And this is a really striking thing. Evidential difficulties where the victim does not support action has risen from around 8% in 2015 to 25% now. So this is this where people just don't feel that there'll be any beneficial outcome, therefore why bother going through with it? Is it because more minor crimes are being reported, such as tweets and nasty words? Because don't the police seem to spend a disproportionate amount of time telling us about our gender pronouns, telling us we should be doing a dance on Pride Day, telling us we should be offended by racist statues, and yet, moving on to our next story, we are currently presiding over an absolute epidemic of knife crime, which seems to be soft-sown.
Yeah, I mean, just to give people some context, and of course, if you can go and see this story over at westmonster.com. I mean, police forces, in these figures, it showed that police forces closed almost half, 43% of offences with not even a suspect identified. 1.4% of rape offences leading to charges. It was 5.2% for theft and 6.9% for violence against the person. I mean, these are shockingly low outcomes. And as you mentioned, we'll go on to knife crime in a minute, but I just think, this is a prime example to me, Martin, of an issue that should be front and centre. It should be leading all the bulletins on the fact now that of crimes committed, 93% are not resulting in charges. And I've had a little look this morning. I mean, there's virtually no coverage of this story. I mean, what do you think? I think this is we've got major problems if our charge rate is more than half in a matter of years. Something has gone badly, badly wrong.
Yeah, and I think this begins and ends really at police recruitment. And there's a double bind here. On the one hand, police numbers have been slashed over the years from Theresa May onwards. That needs to be put right. And secondly, who'd want to be a copper these days? I mean, look at what's going on. You cannot stop somebody if they're from a racial minority for a driving offence without it being headline news on Sky News, front page news about endemic racism. Another police officer in the Met has been suspended overnight. They've got a terrible problem with police recruitment, yet they obviously need more police. The police at the moment, I don't think, can police. They're frozen in the headlights of social justice, of being filmed and shamed, and the fear of losing their jobs. We've got a terrible, terrible crisis with law and order, Michael. And I, for one, wish they'd pull out the batons. I mean, I'm old school.
I actually tweeted out a clip, if you go and have a look, of last night where the police actually, they were coming under attack. And it's one of the first scenes I have seen where they did actually draw their batons and charge. And of course, the mob ran away. By the way, overnight, I also tweeted out a clip this morning of some horrendous scenes in Chicago.
Yeah.
Where there's a far left mob there. They've decided they want the Christopher Columbus statue down. They're pelting the police with bottles, with cans, even fireworks. And I just think, on that broader point of what's going on in America and elsewhere, and over here. I mean, this far left mob, I think, have been given such an easy ride by a lot of the media. I mean, these are political extremists. These are far left extremists that think they have got the right to walk up to statues and tear them down. If the police get in the way, they come under sustained attack. And go and watch the clip, guys. I tweeted it out. It's not just, I'm not talking here 1 or 2 bottles. I'm talking it's around a minute, I think, a minute plus of sustained assault from a large group of people. These, these are very dangerous people. When they sort of charge around mob-handed, deciding they're going to do things, and if you get in the way, they're going to be violent. That is not good. That needs dealing with.
Yeah, and it's happening all over America, and it's a virus that's spread to the UK. You know, when you see scenes of coppers in short sleeves and soft hats in Westminster being barraged by Black Lives Matter protesters, and it's not good enough, Michael, to say, well, it's only a few bad apples. Well, how come that the whole conversation about endemic racism in the police force is, it's okay to say a few bad apples, well, that means the entire lot are racist. But when you start saying, well, these Black Lives Matter protesters who are battering coppers, who are setting fire to the Union flag on the cenotaph, who are vandalising the Churchill statue, well, they don't represent all of them. You can't have it both ways. Now, you've got to get your shop in order and get this together. I think there's a simple solution to this, Michael. What I would do, I would take everybody's details at these protests, and then I would say, hey, you know, you want to defund the police? You know that idea of yours of abolishing the police? Give us your name and number, and we'll put you on a database. And when you call the police in a few years' time, when you've grown up and smelt the coffee, they won't come and answer your phone calls. It's like these are just teenage, infantile imbeciles, Michael.
Yeah, you know, it's really sad. There was actually a clip of a black police officer that's gone viral in America. I think he was in Portland.
Yeah, it was.
And you know, he's saying he's sort of tried to engage with some of the protesters, and then he actually gets abused by sort of white middle class BLM protesters who are sort of tried the far left, basically, who are trying to hijack this movement. And you know, again, a very powerful video. There's no doubt that far left political extremists who were intent on violence and destruction have latched on to this campaign. It's very sad, but they need to be called out and exposed for their behaviour, because hey, it's not like we can rely on the mainstream media to give any balance to this. You know, and that's the great thing about the internet, to be fair. When these clips are coming out overnight of violence towards the police, I make a point of tweeting them out, because if I don't, you know, the chances of them ever being broadcast with much of the narrative we've got are slim to none.
Yeah, and there's a really, it shouldn't be amusing, but it is amusing. There's a really amusing clip on Twitter today of a protester who's bawling his eyes out. He's screaming blue murder at a copper inside a building. I think that was also in Chicago. And then the copper calmly walks up and squirts some pepper spray through the gap into the guy's face, and he starts crying like a baby. Michael, it shouldn't be funny, but it is. Because the point is, I think everyone is just getting a bit sick and tired of this entitled mindset. Like, if I screamed in a policeman's face when I was a kid, A, I'd expect to get a truncheon through my skull. B, if I didn't get that, my mum would confine me to my barracks for a week. Where's the family discipline? Where is the respect for law and order? Where's that coming from? The problem starts, I think, in academia.
Yeah.
All these lefty academics, they have this sixth form, I think, retarded mindset that the police are inherently evil and capitalism is wrong. They're taught how to drive badly and they become bad drivers all their lives. And it's really, really a problem.
Well, something else that's a massive problem, as we mentioned earlier, is knife crime. Again, new figures out for knife crime show that the year ending March 2020, offences involving knives or sharp instruments recorded by the police rose to 46,265. This is a 6% increase, but this isn't an evenly spread, and this is really important to highlight. There was a 7% increase in knife crime in London, but a 10% increase, 10% decrease, in West Yorkshire. In 34% of all knife crimes in England and Wales are now recorded in London alone. London, one of the most disgraceful statistics is this: London saw homicides involved in knife crime increase by 28%, while the rest of the country saw a 7% decrease. And finally, the rate of knife crime in London is 179 offences per 100,000 population, compared to the national average of 82 offences per 100,000 population. Overall, the latest year of stats we have, knife crime now 51% higher than when comparable recording began in 2011 and is the highest on record.
Yeah, it's an absolute shocker. And it's also not remotely surprising, is it? That's the problem that we find ourselves in. We have a culture of endemic racism around stop and search. I had a very, very interesting conversation with Norman Brennan, a retired copper who's going to be a future guest next week on the Westminster News podcast. I spoke to him this week, and he was talking about all of these issues. And it begins young, a lack of discipline at home, often absent father figures, gang culture. And what would be really fascinating, Michael, would be even to drill into the data within London itself and look at it borough by borough. If black lives really mattered to London Mayor Sadiq Khan, he'd clamp down on these neighbourhoods, like we've never seen before. But he can't. He promised in his manifesto when he was elected to wind back on stop and search. He soon changed his tune when the bodies started piling up. And now we have a mayor dependent on votes from certain communities who's caught in the headlights. And the police can't police. Norman Brennan told me this week, Michael, and he's going to say this to us in person. The police are actually being told to do less stop and search on black people now. They're being told to do less at a time when they're clearly carrying more blades than ever before. Now, Michael, this is a huge, huge problem. When are the police going to grow a pair? When are they going to deal with this?
And again, if you compare the media coverage on this, I mean, the fact that knife crime has never been worse, the numbers are skyrocketing, particularly in London. Where's the outrage? Where are the Labour MPs in London and a lot of the areas that are seeing the worst levels of knife crime? What are they saying? There seems to be a complete lack of outrage, and it's something that I'm keen to keep highlighting because these numbers are an absolute national disgrace.
Yeah, but it's really worth dwelling on that point. I don't often interrupt you, Michael, but It's really worth dwelling on that point because the precise areas where this is happening more and more, places like Tottenham, David Lammy, places like Hackney, Diane Abbott, places like Brent North, Barry Gardner, they're all dyed-in-the-wool Labour and they depend on community cohesion. They're the last people on the planet that are going to order a clampdown in their neighbourhoods because they know politically it's divisive.
It's certainly an issue that needs highlighting. And the fact is, I'd like to hear from the lefty lovies and the softies what exactly they want done. Because all they seem to do is want to attack the police and say we need a softer approach on everything. Well, the facts, I'm afraid, speak for themselves. Knife crime is getting worse. It's getting worse, particularly in London. And in my opinion, the only way you can deal with this problem is by getting tougher, not by standing by and talking about the kind of crap you hear or constant excuses. It needs dealing with. It's a massive issue.
Yeah.
Now, just for a dose of reality, I mean, I do like the reason before we get to the last thing, there are a couple of polls that have come out.
Yeah.
That I want to highlight because the thing I like with polls, and they're not an exact science, of course they're not, but it shows you constantly how out of touch the sort of London bubble that broadcasts constantly is. Two particular polls I want to highlight. Number one, Redfield and Wilton asked, to what extent would you support or oppose reinstating the death penalty for those convicted of terrorism in the UK? Now, of course, a lot of MPs, nearly all journalists, people like that, the Twitterati, would be absolutely shocked and disgusted at the question even being asked. But incredible, 51% of Brits in this poll support it, and only 26% oppose the death penalty for convicted terrorists. Another poll done by Kantar has found that the Conservatives are polling up on 45%, up 2 points on the previous poll, with a 10% lead over Keir Starmer's Labour Party. That backs up a YouGov poll that also had the Conservatives 10 points ahead. And finally, they asked people about EU membership. They said, and they changed the wording. They said, would you want to join the EU or stay out? And stay out has a 6-point lead. So there's a number of things there, Martin. Yeah. Number one, the public want, and by the way, what the public think does actually matter. I know a lot of people want to talk down to the public and act as if they need to be re-educated, but I actually think the British public are bloody spot on most of the time with what we think as a country. We're a sensible lot. They want a much tougher approach on dealing with terrorists. The Tories, there is no Keir Starmer resurgence under Labour, and there is no, another load of crap like I see on Twitter quite a lot from some journalists now. Oh, everyone has seen what this means now with Brexit, and they want to rejoin. Sorry, it's not backed up by facts.
Yeah, there's a lot to pick apart here. Let's do it one by one. So the death penalty thing. Now, this is one of the few areas, Michael, that I don't agree with you on, because I'm not in favour of the death penalty. I don't think it works. It's not a deterrent in the United States. I've got a lot of knowledge of this. I've travelled there a lot. My sister has lived there for many years. We've got an American family. I'm not massively in favour of it myself.
Well, yeah, I mean, the main argument that I hear against the death penalty is people say, well, what if you kill the wrong person? Well, there are actual cases where there is 0% doubt. The Lee Rigby killers, the animals that killed him in the streets. There's zero doubt there. But look, whatever your views are on it, it's just interesting to me. It's one of those issues where if you thought that the media was in any way representative of British public opinion, you'd probably put support of it between 5 and 10%. It's 51%, and only 26% oppose. And often, Martin, when I see these polls, I do think that increasingly, perhaps, we're living in sort of almost parallel societies now, where there's a complete and utter. I mean, we talk about it a lot on this show, but I do think that the detachment of people that sort of live and work in London in sort of the media, etc., with what people in the country generally think, they don't almost understand the country that they actually live in. If you see what I mean, they think that sort of the Islington area represents that a lot of them live in represents mainstream British public opinion, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Back to the Conservative poll. I mean, if you believed the newspapers, if you believed the BBC, if you believed Sky News, I mean, you'd have the Tories on their knees. You'd have them practically begging for a new general election just to end their torment. And yet here we go. They're actually up 2% in the polls.
And we hear a lot about, Mr. Starmer, the forensic, he's taking Boris apart. Well, the public don't agree.
Yeah, and also Starmer was so forensic that he kneeled to Black Lives Matter without actually looking at their manifesto on their website, which took 30 seconds. No, I don't buy this Starmer being forensic thing. I will always see him, and I'm saying this as a former Labour supporter for many years of my life, he will always be Mr. Second Referendum, and he can get stuffed. I'm not having a second referendum, and that brings on to this final poll.
Yeah.
There is no appetite to go down this route. There was a party, Michael. You remember our first day in Strasbourg? The Lib Dems waddled in their bollocks to Brexit t-shirts. Guy Verhofstadt pulled one around his corpulent midriff. There he was with his gap-toothed assassin smile. Bollocks to Brexit. Guess what? The electorate said bollocks to them. And that's the point. Nobody wants a second referendum apart from diehard Remainers, and the tail shall never wag the dog. We had the vote. You lost. Move on. And by the way, I'm over the moon that Sir Ian Botham will be a Sir. There's a peerage that again is making this lot go into a froth, an absolute froth. The front page of the Times, Michael, today they're saying Botham given peerage as reward for Brexit loyalty. What are you talking about? He's the greatest cricketer we've ever produced. He's raised millions for charity. And guess what? Ken Clarke and Philip Flaming Hammond are getting peerages. Oh yeah, renowned Brexiteers. Michael, the whole media slant has been anti-Brexit, pro-second referendum, and here we go again, anti-Tory, here we go again. The public do not chime with that.
Well, guys, that's what we're here to do, is to provide you an alternative steely dose of regular sanity. If you do enjoy the show, again, head over to westmonster.club to the Patreon to get shows early and exclusive content, and have a lovely weekend.
Cheers, Brexiteers.